Right, so now that we have collisions set up, um, let's head back to Mixamo.com and take a look at some animations that we can use on our runner character. So make sure to select your runner character, whatever character you decide to go with. And what I'm going to do is just look for Stumble. And there's actually a pretty cool animation that I found down here, which is like this forward roll. Now, I don't want root motion animation that means the character moving across the surface. I want it to be in place. So what I'm thinking is as he hits a hurdle, maybe he'll do this like dive roll over it. You could do this one, which is kind of cool, which is this jogging stumble, which actually makes better sense. I just kind of want to have fun with it. So like this guy, there is no in place for this cartwheel. Otherwise, I would have did something like that. But I like this. Actually, this quick roll to run might actually make better sense. Oh, but you can't do it in place. Yeah, so we got to use the sprint forward roll and select in place. And I'm going to slow it down a little bit. I could always speed up the animations inside of Unity just because I just want the animations a bit clearer. So maybe as you hit it, it goes in there and then he goes back into a run. I'm going to pause the video and download and import it. I think you've already know how to do that. But I'm going to name this roll, this animation. And just to be clear, to save size, sorry, when I hit the download button, I'm going to select without skin, and I'll just leave everything else the same settings. All right, over here in Unity, you can see I imported that roll, and then in the animation section here, I'm going to name this roll. And I want it to loop time and loop pose so that the first and last frame when it goes into the roll is the same. And if you want to check it out, you can grab your runner and drop it in there and then just press play. And you can see there's our roll. So now it's got a nice looping animation. So that looks pretty good. Saving project here, checking it in. And I had that really bad crash, so I'm checking in stuff more and more lately, where I almost had to rebuild the project, which some of you have had to do in previous classes before, so you understand my pain. It's just the nature of the industry, the software that's related to anything 3D related. There's just so many moving parts. All right, so the next thing I want to do is inside of my runner here, I think I have a layout that I made. Yeah, I have all these layouts for 3D and animation and stuff. It looks like I switched off of that, but for now, just to show you, what I tend to do is I create like an animation layout. So I'll go to animation here and I'll dock it at the bottom, something like that. And then if you see, we have our one child below it where our rig is, we have this animation controller. If I double click it, I can grab my animator and dock it down here. And I usually just go to save layout and I'll save this as like animation layout. And then I usually have like a 2D layout when I'm making a 2D game. So inside of our animation here, you can see that we only have a run in there. And the reason for that is it's only corresponding to this. But if we look at our roll, if I drag that in there, now we have a roll. And so if I go back to animation, you can see I can now select roll and it shows me my roll animation. And if I scroll through this, let me go to my scene here. And I select my runner model, which has the component. You can see I can test it in the scene, each animation. And also, if I go into the animator, I can actually make a transition now where I can right click, make transition to roll, and then make a transition back to roll. And inside of here, these are our parameters, these arrows. They have conditions. So what happens if I press play now is you'll see my character run, and he'll go into a roll, and then he'll go back to a run. So if you see that he's running, see how he goes into a roll, and so it's pretty smooth because we're using the same character. And what I want that to happen is I only want this to trigger when we collide with these hurdles, right? And actually, what might have been cool is if we have the hurdle animation, but I kind of want my character to get hurt if he hits a hurdle. So that's what the roll is for. Something else I'd like to do is turn off has exit time. So that way, the second I hit the hurdle, it triggers that transition between the run and the roll. One thing I forgot to point out, which I don't necessarily do just on personal projects, but I want you to do it because to get in a good habit. If your character, you're not using that root motion, which I don't know if we've ever covered root motion, the difference between the two. But anyway, the point is we're using the actual X, Y, and Z axis of the model and not the animation itself to drive the movement of our character. So what you want to do is inside of motion here, let's see. Let's make sure that we have our roll selected, our animation tab, and let's see if we select roll here. see if I can see. We have our curves. We might have to change this. No, we have a generic model. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to leave these parameters as is for now. And because we don't have a root motion node. Yeah, I think we're fine. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at how we can code the triggering of that animation when our character runs into our hurdles. All right, so let's go to our player collision handler here, and let's make a serialized field here. And what I want to expose is a variable that gives me access to that animator component. So it gives me, you might be like, well, why did it give me this underscore animator here? In some naming conventions being like the way some studios code, if the variable is marked private, they'll put an underscore animator. So it's just giving me a suggestion. When it auto typed it out, it's like, oh, do you want to put this underscore here? We don't actually do that at the studio that I'm at now, which is a AAA studio. Actually, they're a little bit more lenient at the way the coding, the way certain coding styles, people use coding styles. They just kind of expect you to be able to roll with the punches, which is kind of cool. It's not the way they did it when I was at Amazon. We had a set, everything was set and structured. But just letting you know the differences. So if you work at a studio, some are more lenient than others. I'm going to go into, let's see, let me delete this, close this for a second. We have obstacle destroy, we have pickup. I'm going to borrow this line of code here. I'm just trying to speed up coding. And I'm going to name this hit. And what I'm going to do inside of here is, inside of this parameter here, I'm going to create a trigger. So under parameters here, parameter, I'm going to hit plus and make sure that you're under parameter, not layer. And I'm going to do a trigger. And I'm going to call this hit with a capital H, like that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this to hit string. And what I want to do is I want to set this trigger. So animator dot set trigger. And I'm going to just type in that name of that variable. So don't type this name colon here. That's just something that they automatically put inside of there. Like the they being writer puts that in there. It's just telling you this is a name of this variable. So what's happening here is when we collide with an object in our scene, right? Remember, this is on our player collision handler. What it's going to do is it's going to turn this trigger on. So if I select this parameter here, I'm going to go ahead and just hit this, and then the condition that it's going to meet is hit is going to have to be set to true, and then it'll go this way. I don't have a condition going back from roll to run, and the reason for that is I'm just going to have roll play, and then actually I think I want exit time there. Let's see how this looks actually. Let me hit play here. And see, it's hitting run. So if I get to one of these hurdles and it says, let's see, oh, I never set, it says unassigned reference the animator player controller. So you probably guessed this, but if you go into runner here, we have this animator controller. I want to grab this, the component, the game object here that has this animator on there. I want to drag and drop that into the player collision handler. And the reason for that is now this gives me access to the animator component, which is here. And inside of that, I have this hit trigger. So what it's saying here is the variable animator, that's this one, of player handler collision, that's a script, player collision handler, has not been assigned. So if I press play here now, and you watch this, I'm going to try to run into a couple hurdles so you can see that. Do you see how now it plays that thing, and then it plays the entire animation as I collide? Now, I guess, like I mentioned before, I could speed it up or slow it down. The other thing is, if I turn off has exit time here, I want to show you how that works too. So I'm going to press play here. And actually, it should just it'll be pretty quick. Yeah, it still plays all the way through as I hit those. So, and then what I can do though is I could say, you know what, that roll animation needs to be a little faster. So let's see. Here's a trick, I think, to getting it. Oh, it's in here. So here's roll. You can see speed. I can actually make that 2 inside of here and press play. And now he'll like roll a lot quicker and then get onto his feet. And that might match the gameplay a little bit better. See that? Oh, the problem is it's not going back. So let's make sure that his exit time is on. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, that's what we want. So now it's a little bit quicker. And he's like, any object he like kind of bumps into the hamburger because it collided with him. Because remember, we're checking if we collide with any object in our scene. And we haven't tackled our food pieces yet. Now, something else we can do, because he doesn't necessarily have to stumble over every whole like hurdle. Like if he gets too many hurdles in a row or he bumps into a food piece. So what we can do just to kind of, just add some variety to our game is we can add a cooldown timer. So let's do float cooldown timer here. And for now, I'll just make it equal to 0. And make sure I put the equal sign in there. And so what I can do inside of update is I can use, because remember update runs every frame, is I could just say cooldown timer equals the time between each frame. So I can say plus equals time dot delta time. And if you forgot what plus equals is, it's the same thing. This is shorthand for writing cooldown timer equals, sorry. This is shorthand for this. So it's saying, it's set at 0. So it's just constantly adding up whatever time that delta time is. That's what this is doing. And then we can add an if statement in here to check if cooldown timer reaches a certain amount, and then we can reset cooldown timer. So let's actually add a serialized field here, and we're just going to make this one a float. And we're going to call this collision cooldown. And we'll make this equal to like 1 second. You could change it to whatever you want in our scene. And what I can say is inside of our collision, so once the hit happens, we could say if our cooldown timer is less than 1 second, which is the equivalent of saying collision cooldown here, then what we'll do is we just won't run that. We'll just exit this method. So I can just put return here. So what'll happen is if it'll call this on collision enter when we bump into it. And this update is always checking this. And then what we'll do is if it is less than 1 second, if cooldown timer, which is less than 1 second, we'll return. If it's not, it'll play the animator set trigger. And then what we'll do is we'll set our cooldown timer back down to 0 here. So let me see if I could trigger that. I might change it to 2 seconds just so you could see it better in our game. So you could see here he gets hit. See how that time he didn't stumble because it's been more than 1 second. Let's change it to like 2 seconds, which I think might be too long. I think 1 second was good enough. I just didn't want it to be him constantly rolling, which is kind of annoying. So he's here. There's 1. It's been 2 seconds. There we go. I think that's good for now. Save, check in your stuff, and always, save project. Make sure this doesn't change, and we'll see you in the next lesson.